Hi guys, hope you all doing well, and this will be the first video that I will be creating for Azure Active Directory B2B collaboration. The agenda for this particular video will be knowing what is Azure Active Directory B2B collaboration, how does this service works, how to enable or customize settings related to this particular feature in Azure Active Directory. How does the invitation process works when a user is added? And how does the authentication works for the B2B collaborators? So let's move on with the very first point, and that is what is Azure AD B2B collaboration. For this, let's consider an ideal scenario wherein we have Azure Active Directory, and let's say the tenant name is tenant.onmicrosoft.com. Now we all know that we manage users and groups in Azure Active Directory, and apart from this, we have a number of applications deployed as well, which we assign to users and groups depending upon their job role. But if we talk about large enterprises, the scope is not limited to one single tenant. They work with multiple partners, which will help them either with their deployment or depending upon the different business units, they have different set of partners. Let's consider an example for this particular enterprise who is going to collaborate or which is going to collaborate with a partner which may or may not have an IT department. So if one single user that belongs to a partner organization that is going to help tenant.onmicrosoft.com or this particular directory with certain deployment or with certain phase in terms of IT infrastructure of or anything. It could be anything. There are two options which can be followed, and the very first one is that either we can create an identity for a user in this particular directory and we can give that to the employee of my partner organization and ask him to go ahead and use that identity, or what I can do is I can use the existing identity of my partner organization for that particular user. Now, what will be the benefit of choosing the second option? That means what will be the benefit of going with this collaboration part is that you don't need to manage the identity. That means when it comes to managing the claims or any attributes for this particular user object or where this user object should exist or how this user is going to reset the password, the identity administration would no longer be your concern. Instead, what you have done is you have simply added this user as a guest in your Azure Active Directory. Now, the moment you will add a user as a guest in your Azure Active Directory, the policies, the services which are predefined as per your configuration will get applied for this particular user. Now, since this user is going to help us with Salesforce deployment or any sort of changes, let's say that is moreover related to Salesforce, what we will do is we will simply assign this user to the Salesforce application, either as a owner or a specific role which is predefined in Salesforce. Now we were doing these things from a quite some time now, and we know how the authentication will work in this case, since both the identities exist in Azure Active Directory. The home directory itself, which is holding the identity, will get the authentication done for the particular user. But now let's consider an example wherein the large enterprise is going to work with those kind of users who don't belong to an enterprise. Likewise, knowledge workers or freelancers, which usually prefer one single identity for everything, and they might come up with the identity that's moreover belonging to a social IDP like Outlook or Gmail. So the B2B collaboration is not now limited only to Azure Active Directory. You can add social IDPs and in fact the identities from different identity providers as well. So let's consider an example that in this case, now we have a knowledge worker or a trainer that will be training the employees of my company, let's say for the Workday application. So what I will do is I will add this particular identity, which could be either user at outlook.com as a guest user in my Azure Active Directory, and then I will assign this user to the Workday application so that he can use the same application with the limited scope that I have defined for guest users and can help my employees in understanding how this particular application is working. Now, this is what B2B collaboration is, that instead of managing the identities in your particular tenant, you can invite users as guests, and you can define custom policies for conditional access. You can assign different applications depending upon the role which that particular partner or which that particular guest user is going to do in your particular directory. Now, let's move on to the second point of how the users are added. Now, adding a user in your directory is possible at three different levels, and the very first one is the directory. That means you're going to add a user directly at the directory level, and then you're going to provision different applications or you're going to provide access to different resources depending upon the guest user that you have added. The second one is adding a user to an application. Now, here level doesn't mean that the scope will be limited. So whenever you will add a user, be at directory or at the application level, an object for that particular user, guest user, will be created in the directory. But what the difference will happen when you will add a user at the application level is that particular user will get the access the moment you will add them. So if we go by the option of choosing the directory, we'll first add the user at the directory and then we will assign the application, the respective applications to that particular user. When you will add a user at the application level, the user will get the access and an object for that particular user would be created by default in the directory. The third option that is available is group. Now, let's say you are using a dynamic group or you have different services or applications that are binded to a particular group. Now, the moment you will add a user to a group, the moment you will invite a guest user directly to a group, what will happen that, let's say there are three applications which used to be deployed the moment any user is a part of a particular group. All those three applications will be deployed, or the user will get the access for those three particular application, as well as all the conditional access policies that you have scoped for that particular group will also work as expected. So these are the three different parts or different levels wherein you can add a user. And now what we will do is we will go through and check all these three options and the rest of the settings which we need to verify on the portal. So let's proceed with the configuration that we need on the portal itself. So as you can see that I'm showing you a list of enterprise application, and you can see Microsoft Invitation Acceptance Portal. Now what exactly this is all about? Whenever you invite a guest user, the user has to go through a process which we call a redemption. Now, this is something which works by a portal which we call Microsoft Invitation Acceptance Portal. And if you want to check this, you can go to Enterprise Applications, then click on All Application, and then go ahead and search for Microsoft Invitation Acceptance Portal. So this is basically a service principle of the service which is actually responsible for hosting the invitation portal for your particular tenant. And either you can enable this as yes or no. If the option is selected as yes, the users will be able to accept the invitation. And if this option is selected to no, the user will not be able to accept the invitation and they will get an error on the invitation portal itself. By default, the value is yes. Just to show you guys what would be the behavior if this option is set to no, I have currently set it to no. Now let's move on to the settings that can be customized or that can be controlled in terms of inviting guest users. So if you want to go ahead and check what are the settings that are responsible for B2B collaboration, go to Azure Active Directory and then select the option of user settings. Now here you will get an option which will say manage external collaboration settings. The moment you will click on here, you will get a list of the options that can be customized depending upon your collaboration or depending upon your particular requirement. So the very first one says guest user permissions are limited. You can either choose yes or no. Then it says admins are and users in the guest inviter role can invite yes or no. So there is a role itself like guest inviter. So if you have added a guest user, you can add that particular user in this role, and then that guest user will also be able to invite the other guest users. You can go through with all these options like members can invite, guest can invite, and then some sort of collaboration restrictions wherein you can allow invitation to be sent to a specific domain. You can deny invitation to a specific domain, and you can allow invitations only to a specific domain. Now, these are all the options which can be customized as per your requirement. If you want to know more detail about any of these four options, just navigate to this small information icon and you'll come to know what is the purpose of this particular option. Now we have looked the settings that is required for external B2B collaboration. We have also looked for the service principal, which is responsible for invitation. Now what we'll do is we'll check the three levels where the users can be added. Now, if I go to Azure Active Directory and if I click on users, I'll go to all users and I have clicked on new guest users. That means what? At this particular example, what I'm trying to do is I'm going to add a user at the directory level. And this is how you can invite a guest user just by clicking the option of new guest user. So I'm going to send the invitation to one of the user that is holding an Outlook account, ConceptsWork user1 at outlook.com, and I'm just customizing the message that's itself, in which I'm saying that please accept this in this invitation request to be a part of ConceptsWork directory. Now, the first thing that we have observed here is we are adding the user at the directory level. Now, the second thing that we can do is we can perform the same method for group as well. So I selected the option of a group. After selecting the option of Azure Active Directory, I've selected the respective group. The group name is App Group 1, and then I clicked on members, and then I clicked on add members, and I'm here, and I'm inviting an external user, which is again concepts user work user 1, and you can again type a personal message here. So we can add a user at the directory level, at the application level, and now the third option that we are going to check is adding the user at the application level. So you can click on add user and then you can send the respective message, the invitation message to your particular user. Now this would be the group. The first one that we discussed was directory, and the last one that we discussed was the application. Now let's start with the sending invitation request to one of our user and see how the redemption process will work. So what I have done is I have invited a user at the directory level. What you can do is you can try at the group if you have some services provisioned, or you can try it at the application level as well, just to see if the application is working as expected. So what we are getting now that the invitation is being sent to the user, and now what I'll do is I'll switch to my user and see that whether I have received an invitation or not. And yes, there is an invitation which is available And now I'm going to click on get started so that I can see how this user gets added. But before that, I would like to show you something that the moment you will send an invitation request to one of your user, what you can do is you can go ahead and navigate to that particular user and then click on source and then check the source property, and here it will say invited user. Now if we go back to our account which has accepted the request, and if I click on get started, you will see that I'm getting redirected to invitation.microsoft.com. Now since in our directory that option is set to no, what I'm getting is an error that invitation redemption failed. Now what I'll do is I'll go back to my directory and I'll go back to that settings, and I will change that setting so that I will be able to accept the request. So I'll go here and I'll change the option now to enable user sign in, and I will set it to yes. Now what this will do is it will make the invitation portal again available for my particular tenant. So now I'll go here and I will close this. I will refresh my session, the session for Outlook for my mail itself, and then I again open that particular email and I'll click on get started. For this particular instance, this should work. It's not working because some of the details might have been cached. So what I'll do is I will re-log in. I will log in again and I will see if it is working or not. So let's close this and I'll go back to portal outlook.com and I will sign into my mail account, and then I will go ahead and check and I will try to accept the meeting, and let's see if it works or not. So I'm going to type my password and then I will be signed in into my account. Okay, so I'm signed into my account now, and now I'm going to redeem the invitation again, and let's see if it works or not. So again, enable sign in option is very important when it comes to checking whether this particular service is enabled for your tenant or not. Now, one very important thing that needs to be taken care of, that needs your attention, is that we are getting a consent prompt. And one more thing that you need to observe is that it has been presented to you by invitation.microsoft.com, the same portal, the settings that we were customizing from Azure Active Directory console itself. Now, the moment I will click on accept, what will happen? You will see an acknowledgement, a redirect here to login.live.com. And then from here, we'll go back to the page which should be presented to us as per the invitation that we have sent. And thus the authentication will get completed. Now, the question comes that why login.live.com? In this case, it is pretty much obvious since we are using Outlook account, it will go to login.live.com. But let's say you are using a gmail.com account or any account which does not exist in live database. So what will happen that the moment you will sign in with the Gmail account, login.live.com will present you an acknowledgement of accepting a request wherein your account will get created in the live database, and then that particular identity will actually be used to send an acknowledgement to login.microsoftonline.com so that you can go ahead and access the respective resources which are being assigned to you. Now, let's go back to our presentation to discuss about the summary of what all we discussed. So, we have discussed what is B2B collaboration, how does this service work, the Microsoft invitation service principle, which on which you can select the option of enable user sign-in set to yes or no, how you can customize the settings, the external collaboration settings in the directory, In order to check that, go to Azure Active Directory and then click on User Settings. How does the invitation process work? So the user can be invited at three different levels: directory, application, and group. And how does the authentication works for the B2B collaborators? Now, since we were doing this from a long time, we know that if we are inviting a user from external Azure Active Directory, it's login.microsoftonline.com itself, which will complete the authentication process for you. If you are using an Outlook account, then login.live.com will get the authentication part done for you. If you are using a Gmail or a third party uh, ID, when the user will sign in for the very first time, they will get a prompt to get an account created in login.live.com with the a password. And next time onwards, again, login.live.com will provide the identity services for those IDs like Gmail or third parties. So if you have any suggestions, feedbacks, or query regarding this particular video that I have covered, please feel free to reach us at learnsconceptwork@gmail.com. There will be two more videos that I will be creating for this particular feature of B2B collaborators, and I will be uploading them soon. Thank you so much. Thank you guys for your time. Have a great day. Bye bye.